Okay, today we're going to talk about Chapter 15, Lesson 2, Africa's Governments and Religions. So, first we'll start with Ghana. Ghana was, we remember we mentioned before about the different kingdoms that were growing up in the West, right? And so Ghana was ruled by strong rulers, and they had set up strong central governments with the help, of course, of ministers and advisors. They divided their empire into provinces. So each province was ruled by kind of what you'd call a lesser king, someone who reported to the king. And then that district was further divided. I'm sorry, the province is further divided into a district, okay? And each district had a district chief. Each of those districts would have, the villages would be from the chief's clan or group of descendants of the same ancestor. So that's how usually the clans would live together, right? So that's makes sense that they would join those clan groups into a district. Interesting that the leadership of Ghana, it is not passed to the leader's son, but to the king's sister's son. So the king's nephew. So that's kind of a difference of most places. Interested? All right, and then we're going to talk about each of the governments first. So then Mali's government was very similar to Ghana. It had more territory, people, and trade, though. It got bigger. And so the king had to control a very strong central government. They also had provinces, but their provinces were ruled by generals. And the generals usually came from the province so that people would be, respecting the general that they knew, right, and that was one of them. The most famous king we have from Mali was someone named Mansa Musa, which we will talk about him a little bit more. But he was known for getting loyalty by giving out gold, property, and horses. And one of the interesting things he did was give a special honor to military heroes called the National Honor of the Trousers. So pants, basically. He would get a pair of pants as a reward. And that might seem weird, but at the time, only the king and his family could wear clothing that was sewn. Everyone else had cloth that was, wrapped around you, kind of like a toga, right? And so to be able to have sewn pants and, dress like one of the royalty, that was quite a high honor. Okay. All right, we'll talk about more about him and the Mali Empire a little bit in a second. Going on to another government, Songhai's empire, and we will again talk about this a little bit more in detail, but they had a general who seized power, Muhammad Toure, and Toure was excuse me, he was a devout Muslim, and he took over and was supported by the other Muslims who wanted it to become a Muslim empire. And the government was provinces again, run by a group of people, a governor, a tax collector, judges on a court, and then trade inspectors. And the way that they made sure that they had peace and everything went well is they had a navy and a cavalry to enforce and make sure it was peaceful. All right, now we're going to switch over and start talking about religions instead of government. So first of all, one thing you need to know is throughout African history, there have been many different traditional African religions. Some people still follow them today. Sometimes they're called folk religions now. And so there's a variety, but they have some common religious beliefs. Like, for instance, many of them believe in one single creator God. Okay, so even though they have some differences, that is something that is pretty common. And of course, the purpose for the religion is common throughout. And this is true really for all religions, right? It gives people rules to live by, right? Common morals. They have a common history together. They can show honor to their ancestors, and it helps to, give them a path for how they're supposed to act, and they think that they'll have success in their life if they and they'll be protected, right, if they follow the rules of the religion. So, that's really true for all religions. It gives people a sense of organization and purpose and protection. Okay, and one of the things that happened in traditional religions is they believe that sometimes people had the power to foretell events, right? Like a fortune teller, and they called it a diviner. So often kings would hire these diviners to come work for the king to help make sure that the king, right, protected their kingdom and told, what was going to happen, or give advice, they didn't make the wrong decisions. Okay. All right, Islam. We know it's coming. And we mentioned early on about the Berbers and the Arab merchants coming and going across Western Africa. And they're going to, of course, bring religion with them, like we've talked about a lot, right? So there are quite a few primary sources written by someone named Ibn Battuta, and he was an Arab, and he wanted to go visit all the Muslim parts of Africa. And so he goes on this journey, and he, writes about how devout the Western African Muslims were. He was surprised to see that women didn't wear face coverings or veils. And we see in this time period, right, that sometimes the rulers had no intention really of converting themselves, but they accepted and allowed Islam in their kingdoms because they wanted to have good relations with the Muslim Arab traders, right? And so what we see is they don't really convert themselves, the rulers, till about the thousands or so, and then the late 1400s is the AD, right? Late 1400s, we see a lot of sub-Sahara or south of Sahara desert converting to Islam. So if you look at the map now, you can see, you still see a lot of Islamic influence, right? A lot of Muslims in the northern part of Africa, and the central and southern part, now it's more Christians. And the orangish areas are where there still are today people following those tribal religions. All right. I mentioned we were going to talk more about Mansa Musa. So remember, he was the king of Mali, and he is a devout Muslim, okay? So he does allow his subjects to practice different religions, but he also is trying actively to spread his religion. So he does a lot, spending his money on building mosques. In Timbuktu, one of the cities he takes over, he sets up libraries with Muslim books, trying to educate people. And then, being a good Muslim, he wants to make the pilgrimage to Mecca. And so he and many of his followers and slaves go on. It takes about a year, right, to travel to Mecca. And they bring 80 camels laden down with gold, about 2 tons of gold, and he gives a lot of it away to the poor. So he's making quite a spectacle of himself, right? And so he's also getting attention for his kingdom and making, people impressed with the wealth of, and Mansa Musa was, we believe, the richest man in history. So even today's Amazon, right, doesn't compare to Mansa Musa. So he goes on this journey, and he also convinces some Islamic scholars to return to Mali with him to help in his goal of spreading Islam. Okay. Here we go. Islam also spreads to other empires. Songhai is, I mentioned this earlier. So I mentioned Muhammad Tur is going to come in originally, but the leader before him, remember I said he took over, Sunni Ali was the ruler before him, and he actually became Muslim, but really he just did it to, like I said, have good relations with the Arab merchants. And when he died, of course, his son didn't want to convert to Islam, and so he refused. And so that made some of the Muslim followers unhappy, and that's when the general took over, like I mentioned earlier. Okay. And Muhammad actually takes on a new name as Askia Muhammad, and that is when he starts really converting this kingdom to Muslim. They follow Muslim laws. He makes Timbuktu an important center of Islamic learning. And remember, if you're getting confused because I mentioned Timbuktu before, we're going to do a map activity and you'll see the overlapping of the different kingdoms, right? That they develop over different time periods, but then they are all after the same, right? Influential. And Timbuktu is a major trading city, so of course they're going to want that, right? All right. He also sets up a famous university and open schools to try to teach about the Quran and Islam. All right. A separate idea. Interestingly, in the east part of Africa, which I did a zoomed in map, so hopefully you kind of know where this is on the map. There was a blending happening and a new culture developed in East Africa. So Islam did come there, but it didn't gain as many followers until later. And then basically there was a blending happening of traditional African and Muslim cultures. So that became this new culture known as Swahili. And Swahili, the word means people of the coast, okay? But the word actually refers to the culture and the name of the religion. So you have to listen to how it's being used. The word is used for both. And it's still around in Africa today. And those of you who went to Africa, to Tanzania with me, might remember we heard a little bit about this because it's in that area. Okay. Let's see. Let's go on to Islam's effect overall. So there's far-reaching effects. Obviously, we see a lot of Africans who accept the religion and Islamic laws and ideas, and they're going to be influenced by all the Islamic learning that is brought in. They, of course, a lot of the Arabic language is going to be spread, and we do see a lot of art and architecture being spread throughout Africa with all the mosques and palaces. You see quite a bit of the influence, right, Islamic influence in many of the, like there's some major palaces in Timbuktu and other major cities too that are beautiful.